Good evening and welcome. This evening I have the privilege and challenge of introducing Mark Pullein and the work of Survival Research Laboratories, SRL. Challenge, I feel, because one could easily fall prey to the many descriptions and readings of the work, its message, its significance, its idea, what it means, etc. Much has been said and much has been written. Interpretations abound. I'll resist this temptation, choosing instead to simply reaffirm what some others have felt, what a few have perhaps courageously said, and I believe it certainly bears repeating. That is the following, that the work points in part to the limits of language, art speak, and prepackaged descriptions. And that in the face of experience, and the experience I'm describing, true experience, the experience of the spectacle, the confrontation with oneself, with one's beliefs, words and concepts are nothing more than snowflakes dissolving in fire. Antonin Artaud, a kindred soul perhaps, wrote some 70 years ago after viewing a certain painting of André Masson, the description of a physical state. The grenade deploys a flaky network which rises like tongues of fire, cold fire. The mind is firm. It has a foothold in the world. The grenade, the belly, the breasts are like testimonial proofs of reality. There is a dead bird. There is a foliage of columns. The air is full of pencil strokes like knife slashes. Like the scratches of a magic fingernail, the air is adequately stirred. Please join me in welcoming Mark Pullein to SCIARC and allow me to offer this small word of appreciation for adequately stirring the air. Mark Pullein.
Okay, the symbolic microphone adjustment taken care of. I was here before, not in this building, but I did speak at SCIARC back in '87. I actually met a person today who was present at that event, and as I found out, people eventually forget after a couple years. You can sneak back in places. Maybe a place like this, we're not so unwelcome, or things that have happened under the auspices of SRL wouldn't be so unwelcome, but it's also true for places where you're not very welcome. You always can get back in if you just wait a few years. So anyway, I'm here tonight to just talk a little bit about, obviously the changes. SRL's continually evolving and shifting and sneaking, an organization sort of sneaking about its business. And tonight I'm going to talk a little bit about the direction SRL's gone in since then, a little bit about we're doing a show in the end of November, November 26th, in San Francisco, so I want to talk a little bit about that, and just more along the lines of like how do you do a large, complicated project with a lot of really, severely, involved logistics. And how do you do it under the cloak of secrecy, under like multiple layers of assumed names and fake identifications, and get away with it? And it's something that we've sort of taken more of a forefront with us as we've become more known and our shenanigans have become more evolved and more obvious. We've had to become much sneakier and devious, not only in acquiring the means to do what we do, but in actually staging the performances. We've had to really spend an awful lot of time trying to maintain pace with the image, or the negative image of SRL and what it's done in amongst like a bureaucracy of people who would include safety officials, property owners, people who can help us and sometimes make it very difficult for us to do business. So I'll talk a little bit about that, because I think that anybody who's certainly in architecture, a lot of it is like, how do you bend the rules and break them without getting put in jail, really. I mean, in my case, it's like, how do you do it? How do you get away with it without putting in jail? How do you even get away with it at all? Because you know, without the location, we can't stay in business. Talk a little bit about that, about some of this. We're going to show video that I doubt if anyone else here has seen of a show that we did about a year and a half ago in San Francisco, a calculated forecast of ultimate doom, which was our apocalypse show, and which is the biggest show we ever did, and created enormous problems for us in the city of San Francisco as far as the fire department and the city attorney and things like that, because we really burned them pretty badly, I guess, and they weren't very happy. They've been trying to get even with us since then, actually, in their own little ways. And I'm going to talk a little bit about, I mean, we've done a lot. I don't know if any of you follow the internet hype, but we've also done a lot of stuff involving, I mean, we've had an internet site for a couple years. There's a number of websites that have a lot of SRL information that I'm involved in maintaining. We're also working on projects to control. In fact, we will be doing a project by the end of the year, which again, in SRL fashion, I'm not going to tell you too much about it, but it's going to basically be set up as a weird hoax to hoax a certain fraternity of the science community. And I'll talk a little bit about that. And any of you who are conversant in the behavioral psychology will probably be aware of the experiment that it refers to. But hopefully, you know, we'll be responsible for getting some new laws passed about the use of the internet and about what you can't do. And we'll talk about that stuff, show some tape things, and answer some questions, stuff like that. I think probably right now I'm going to turn on the little, we redo the logo at SRL every couple of years, or I redo it every couple of years. So this is the latest SRL logo, which you can see. This doesn't seem to focus very close up, but I'm going to try it over here. It didn't focus over there. This is sort of this logo is sort of about the props or the situations more that we create in the show, sort of like the ends instead of the means, really. There's not so many machines there because I get sick of seeing pictures of all the millions of machines we make. But I'll just get back to a quick, a lot of you maybe don't know that much about SRL, but I'll describe it briefly for you. Essentially, SRL has gone through many iterations. It began out of a just, desperate disenfranchisement, being a, in the figurative sense, of course, being a white guy, I can never be too disenfranchised, and I know that, but I can pretend, okay? I can pretend, and that's why I do pretend, that's why I'm involved in a pretend rebellion against those kind of things, because we're not out there blowing up buildings and unibombing and stuff like that and that kind of thing. We're just trying to have fun and, collect other people along the way who are mildly disenfranchised, but not to the point where they're killing and maiming. But it started out as just that, and I just wanted to find a situation where I could use all the different skills I had and kind of put it into something because I didn't feel like anything else served my purposes. So I came up with the idea of making machines and doing shows with them and promoting them as sort of theatrical events where the machines were actors in these sort of satirical, political dramas, the themes of which were always sort of implicit and not really explicit. In other words, you can see from a title like a calculated forecast of ultimate doom, whereas there's a specific use of language, it could mean anything, right? Really. But it started out that way. I did that for a few years. Then it became a partnership with myself and Matt Heckert and Eric Werner, and we worked together for about 5 or 6, 7 more years. And then those guys took off. Matt does, Werner works on hot rods mostly. Matt does sound sculpture things. He's in Europe now doing shows. He doesn't make the same kind of machines he made at SRL, but he's still in the field of doing things, working to express ideas and stuff with machines. After that, SRL became more, I would say, more of an organization where there were a lot of people who were working under the auspices. I was, back as the figurehead director completely. I was, doing all of that kind of work of like what was to be going on and how everything was to set up for the shows. And then now it's sort of, in the last couple of years, it's turned into more of a network of people. It's gone from being an organization to a network. A lot of the people that had worked building machines at SRL, what I did is I helped them set up their own machine shops. And then now they actually do shows on their own. There's like Christian Rizzo, who just had a show band down here a couple weeks ago. He works with the Seaman. He just, LAPD just said, no thanks, you know. They found some technicality to bust them on, and they spent 2 days setting up. And you would have seen a couple of interesting machines. I don't go so much for the human aspect of their performances, the music aspect, but, you know, they still have some okay pieces of equipment there. But that's, you know, Christian's part of that group. There's Chip Flynn, who does a thing called People Hater. There's Chico McMurtry, Matt Heckert. There's a number of other young people who are out there building machines more along the sculptural lines. But there is sort of basically what happens is we have an association within all these different groups and people connected to them, maybe more than they are to SRL. But whenever there's an SRL show, the deal is that I incorporate all of the people who have their own shops into the SRL production. That goes whether it's here in other countries or whatever. So it's interesting how it's grown. And then there's more components to the organization. There's like not only just the electronics and the sort of high energy physics and the design stuff of like the props and prop building, that kind of thing. There's also there's like a whole computer science department now where people are mostly involving internet stuff and more advanced methods of machine control. And the people who help set up the scams, the front organizations, and lawyers actually. We actually have lawyers that we work with to make sure that the contracts are written that we can sue people for if they try to back out. All kinds of things like that we have to. So the organization has had to broaden out into this network of people in order to really make the shows happen. It's just become more difficult. But it's nice too because we're able to, even in the same way that organizations move their resources from a physical organization to sort of a global network, which is even more difficult to control. We've found that we really had, I found that really SRL had to do the same thing in order to be able to keep operating, just because of the pressures of trying to have everybody work in one place wasn't really, I don't think, that healthy. The fact of having it always be identified as SRL, makes it a little bit more difficult from a regulatory standpoint. It's been a lot easier to do these front organizations to get places and stuff like that, doing it this way. Basically, the business is the same. We stage productions involving the manipulating and kind of remarketing, I guess, if you want to call it that, technologies that some of which are a little antiquated or really have lost some of their use value, some of which are really, on the cutting edge of what's possible. We take those and we sort of reconfigure them to the needs of SRL, which are ultimately needs that are as far divorced from anything practical as possible. That part really hasn't changed. It's all really in the service of creating sort of situations that impose somehow on the status quo, and call that political, call it whatever you want. I just like the idea of proving that, that you can take technology that usually sort of controls people and control it, really understand the language enough to sort of be able to throw it back in the face of the culture and sort of make a little bit of, in a way that's deeply satirical. And anyway, that's basically what the organization does and kind of how it operates. Probably a lot of you have seen, maybe some of you have seen videotapes. We've always put out videotapes of the shows. We haven't put any out for a couple years. We have a few that we're going to be releasing in the next month or two, actually, as soon as this show's over. I think what I'd like to do before I go on anymore is I want to show you the videotape from the show that we did in San Francisco in May of '94. That was Calculated Forecast of Ultimate Doom show. I have a very nice videotape of that, about 15 minutes long, that was done by Leslie Gladjo, directed and shot by her. And I guess that's, is that ready to, can I just turn this off and then we can just start that? Okay. What about this monitor here? Does this monitor need to be turned? There's nothing going to be on it? Oh, okay. All right. Okay, well, we'll watch that tape, and then I'll go into a little bit about the show that we're doing, and a little bit about how to set up the logistics on one of these. You'll get to see the fun part here, okay? And then we'll talk about like the pain in the ass part. Oh, okay. Not record. Hello. So that's sort of what a show's like. That show is about 50 minutes long, and it's about 50 minutes long, and we had about 4,000 people in that site. And it looks easy. I think in that this is probably about 95 or 90% of the stuff we had intended to have happen for the show happened. I mean, you can see that there's some sort of there's a little bit of a lack for what any kind of a narrative sort of communication that you're making. I mean, we don't have people up there delivering lines or anything like that. And I think that, but generally, what you see here is consistent with the way that we try to tell stories with the machines. I mean, in this case, you've got the idea of the show is that it was somehow a show about the apocalypse. So, of course, we had all of the various sight gags that have been handed down through history. But instead of just like reading about them in encyclopedias or seeing references to them in books or having like older people sort of speak out, mouth aphorisms that encapsulate them, we've got, we actually build the things and actually like do stuff with them in shows. Like, you've got, the Last Supper, right? Okay, the Second Coming. So Jesus rides in on a jet-powered go-kart, right? Instead of, coming, I mean, those are all the little things. Seeing a clown head, right? We all know when you see clowns and spiral staircases that something really bad's going to happen. It just can't be. And in the case of clowns, it's just too good to be true. In the case of spiral staircases, that it's, there's something just wrong about a person climbing up something like that. There's always that chance they're going to fall down. Things like that. Sea serpents in the water, right? The serpents rise from the sea and all that kind of stuff. Sometimes I think that the shows are there's more attention paid to the way that the theme might be borne out with these kind of sight gags and stuff. Sometimes less. Sometimes we don't even title the shows. They're just sort of free-for-alls that are organized. I mean, they're structured, but they're not organized around a specific theme or anything like that. I mean, we did a show for the Museum of Modern Art in San Francisco for their groundbreaking a couple years ago, and I deliberately made the show devoid of anything artistic at all that I could think of. I made it as unartistic as possible. It just sort of like gross and kind of loud and disgusting and sort of disruptive of the downtown area where the thing was. And it worked very well for me, but I think that on some level, perhaps real aestheticians might have been, aesthetes might have been a little bit disappointed, perhaps. So, we always sort of aim to please as much as we aim to sort of annoy people or kind of create problems. I think that there's a pretty broad range of responses to what we do. A lot of people seem to, not like it very much, or they like one show and they don't like another. Some people seem to like it quite a bit. I don't know. I'm not sure I really trust why they think they like it. I don't know. I mean, basically, we don't work too much in deference to the audience. I mean, you can see even from the sight lines from that show, they're not so great, really. That was like a 600-foot long building, like 100 feet wide, and we did a show across the whole area. It really is about creating a world for machines where they're living out some kind of a Ouija board fantasy where, you put all these components together, in this case, and sort of turn them on. You have a structure that you're trying to adhere to, but really you're trying to, on a moment-by-moment basis during the show, everyone's on those helicopter headsets, and I don't actually run machines in the shows. I just sort of hang around and yell at people, do this, do that. And so basically people who are operating are expected to not kill anyone in the audience, first and foremost, but they're also expected to be able to take their own initiative, and if they see something coming up or a machine's not working or they can't adhere to the script, they have to either decide what to do or I have to try to figure out what to tell them to do. So in some ways it is really kind of a crapshoot. You just don't really know. I mean, it really is like the ultimate expression of Murphy's Law, where you put that much stuff together in one place, you make sure everyone that's working on it is really tired and exhausted, and you sort of see what happens. I mean, so far we've done 47 of these shows. Probably about 35 of them have been big shows. I would say shows for at least a couple thousand people. The rest have been smaller productions. You know, we've never injured anybody seriously yet. I think the worst that happened is there's one person got a bloody nose one time because they were wearing a face shield. If they hadn't been wearing a face shield, the face shield wouldn't have got knocked against their nose by a shockwave cannon. They would have been okay. They never would have got a nosebleed. So, you know, you just can't win, basically. But so far, we have a real good insurance rating. We can still get $1 million policies for $350. I like to find any softball league that gets those kind of special event policies. I mean, it's a volunteer organization. I mean, I've described a little bit about how the shows work. I mean, there's a very long list of things that I would count under the logistics of doing these kind of big projects. I mean, the first is creating an image for the organization that draws people to it. I mean, for one thing, we strictly adhere to a policy of non-commercial exploitation of what goes on, of the people who work there. And part of the fun of SRL is all the weird offers I get to make money off of it, and all the people I get to turn down and make really angry at me. And it's a never-ending quest that people seem to, you know, there's that sense, and it gets sharper and sharper, that sense that the stock of SRL is deeply devalued, and they should try to buy now and sell high later, you know, and make a killing off it. But, you know, all those game manufacturers and all the sharks that come by just say, well, that sounds like, I always talk to them as long as I can until I have to just say no, just because it's more fun, just because the disappointment is much deeper. And yeah, you know, then you like to let them think that maybe they're really, you know, they're really going to get one over on you. And then you just say, I'm really sorry, but I'm not interested. I couldn't do that. I just couldn't do it. And so that's part of it. Part of it is that, you know, there's not, I mean, what that's done, having a thing like that, and really, you know, trying to have an organization that not only for me personally encapsulates sort of a feeling of malingering rebelliousness that you kind of have to like stay sane in the society, but you know, actually, you know, creating that image, and making it really clear so that SRL becomes a repository for all the people who work, for instance, at high-tech corporations or at recycling places, high-tech recycling places, that maybe see in SRL a way that they can use some of their time and energy or get equipment from their company by hook or by crook or whatever, and then bring it down to us to use or apply their services to these, I mean, really difficult problems. I mean, for instance, you see radio-controlled devices being hit by Tesla coils. That's non-trivial to actually have that happen and to maintain control. To maintain control of 9 channels of radio-controlled devices, some of which are controlled by radio Ethernet. They're not even like all custom equipment. To have 9 devices operating in an atmosphere where you've got electromagnetic rail guns, gas turbines firing, all sorts of metal particles in the air, to keep them actually functioning reliably and safely is a very difficult engineering task. And it requires people who have a solid foundation in the sciences and computer science and things like that. And you know, by having the kind of organization that we have, we've been able to attract those kind of people to it and be able to get the kind of equipment that those people feel like, you know, we probably have the best prototyping shop in the city of San Francisco, certainly in the city of San Francisco. We have some of the best machine tool equipment. You know, we have nice computer equipment, electronics equipment that we've accumulated over the years, and lots of stuff. Tons and tons of cool stuff, like, you know, bunches of jet engines and, you know, all that kind of stuff. But you know, by setting it up as that kind of a place, instead of money coming into the bank, you get these other things which are sort of more amorphous, really, like just talent, really, or equipment that you don't know really what you're going to use it for. But it's nice because you're always getting new people in the organization. You're always getting new equipment all the time, and you know, coupled with the fact that SRL really is sort of vaporware in a way. I mean, really, when there's no show going on, there's just me and a couple other people, and I'm just in there I'm always on the scam trying to get shows or design new things or whatever. But basically, because there's not a lot of overhead and not a lot of people there when there's nut shows going on, the direction of the organization can change really fast. And, you know, coupled with the fact that you're always getting new stuff and new people, and it keeps it lively. I mean, it's it's fulfilling at least my personal interest in having something that I can do for 50 or 60 years, where I don't ever have to do anything routine ever. It's always like some different tack you're trying to take, and so in some ways, we never got the money. We got some notoriety, but we still attract really nice people around there, really nice men and women who don't try to kill each other and do bad things to each other or hurt each other, hurt themselves accidentally. People who are nut assholes, the kind that you wouldn't want to have around that kind of lethal equipment. And I don't know, it's just been going on for 15 years and it still seems to be going on. That's just part of how the organization regenerates itself, which to me is an important part of it. Now I want to go into a little bit about just how an actual show comes about. Like I said, we've had to be a lot sneakier recently. This last show that you saw here, we rented it under a fake name. We rented that property from the Port Commission. The city tried to stop the show. We had 4 days on site. The city tried to stop the show through the Port Commission, and we had set up the contract. We had a lawyer set up the contract for that event so that we could just say, this clause, we're going to sue you on this clause if you think you're going to stop the show. And of course, it's a bulletproof clause. They would have lost 50 grand. The lawyer said, guaranteed, they'll have to do a 50 grand out of court settlement, no problem. So we just threatened that, and when they tried to stop it, we just said, well, we're going to just do this. If you think you're going to stop this, you're not going to stop this. You're going to get the shit suit out of your asses. And I said, go tell the city, go tell the city attorney that. So they went to, Louise Rennie heard that, and she went through the roof. And so what happened with that is she tried to sue the guy whose name was on the papers, who kind of set up. She's been trying to sue him for like a year or so, but he's sort of an amorphous personality. They never found him or anything, so it doesn't, it doesn't really matter. But they were kind of out for blood. And then we had a show. We had a show offered to us by this computer graphics company. They do they just build chips, and they said they'll give us $95,000, which is the kind of budgets we would get in Europe, to do a special event for them. They could say we could do basically a private party for them, and they would give us the location and do an SRL show the next week, and we could do anything we wanted with it. They give us a site for a whole month. It's a really sweet deal. Rights to all the video. They wouldn't even have rights to the video of the event. We'd share the rights of that with them. So it was a pretty cool deal. And the Film Commission had gotten us a location out at the Hunters Point military base, and the people at the military base thought it was really cool. They thought it was a great idea. They were going to give us this little radar building. And then the city attorney heard that the Film Commission was working on it, and she said, quote, SRL is a liability to the city of San Francisco. Anybody from the Film Commission that works with SRL will be fired. And if anything happens, they'll be in more trouble. If there's but nothing's going to happen, so just stop working with them. So we lost, the company got kind of freaked out when they heard that was why it got stopped, that we had a bad reputation. So that bad of a reputation that we would get one part of the city government to work with us, and the other part would just slap them down and say, forget it. Anyway, that was in the spring. And then the other thing that happened from this show that sort of changed the way we worked is we've always had sort of a testy relationship with the fire department. We did a co-production with CBS on this show, and on this last show, and it was on I don't know if any of you saw it. There's about an 8 or 10 minute spot on the Connie Chung show, which is really, really amazing. Connie Chung says, "It's just so weird." Connie Chung says that about SRL on prime time, and but they couldn't show any. They had a bunch of video, but they couldn't show anything weird like Last Suppers or anything. So all they could do was stress how dangerous it was. And so they kept stressing in this program how dangerous it was. Of course, nobody got hurt, right? And so they just had to make it look weird anyway. So one of the things they did is they had this guy who was a fire marshal, and they interviewed him. He had the whole lieutenant's outfit on, and they just edited him so he looked like a total jerk, an idiot who had no control over it. And we were trying to do another show about a month and a half after this other one, which we kind of got offered as a sympathy thing because that one got stopped by the city attorney. And the guy who was doing the show got a call from the fire department who had heard about it, and we didn't even really know how they found out about it, but somehow they found out we were doing this event next to this building and using some city support services for it, or planning on doing it. And the guy just called this guy up. He said, you know, you're going to be out of a job if you work with these guys. We have a vendetta against them because of this show. And, you know, they embarrassed us on public television, national television, and we've had calls all around the country from other firemen talking about, you know, saying, what's going on with you guys? You look like fools. You know, these people are making you look like idiots. So whatever, you know. But now what we've done is we've rented another location, and it's near a post office, actually. And this is our Crime Wave show. This is a crime in the streets show. And again, we're even sneakier this time. We not only rented the property, we got the insurance. There's a gallery that's being the front organization for it, and they went. And you know, finally, I just bitched and complained about how we're not getting enough shows, and I just complain to everybody I hear about it, and bitch about people being too chicken to put on our shows and stuff like that. And eventually, we sort of shamed this guy into doing it, you know. He's a nice guy, but we really, you know, it almost was like that, you know. Come on, you know. Like, we're adults. You can, like, put our shows on. Nobody's going to get hurt. You won't get in trouble, really. And so we finally talked this guy into doing it. He has a really interesting gallery in San Francisco, and he acted as the front person. He went and talked to the people that own the property and convinced them that it was an art event, described it in a way and put it on a contract in a way that it would be legal. They wouldn't be able to be stopped legally, that we could sue the company if they tried to stop it. And we did the whole thing, got the insurance and everything like that. And you know, we're not announcing the location until the day before. And I believe there are already people who are trying to find out the day, where it is and stuff. But what I did is I made this image of the site, which is the image that we're working from. I'll give you a little bit of an idea of some of the things that will be in the show. But it doesn't have a formal title. Usually the titles don't really come up until like a week or so before. There will be some kind of a title for it. But this is this is the place here. You can sort of see it there. It's a little hard. I can't really get this thing focused so much. But anyway, it's about 300-foot long space here. Again, it's a crime in the street show. So we've got this thing here for the BBC. We did a feature documentary with the BBC recently that aired in the UK. It's called Pandemonium. It's aired. This is part of the TX series. This is coming onto the BBC in December. It's a very good documentary. It has basically SRL and Stellar. I don't know if you're familiar with Stellar. It does really weird things with robots and stuff. But anyway, this was a giant dancing cross. It basically was a big cross. It had a box on it. It was all connected with rubber. It was just kind of dancing and had Bibles all over it. And it goes up and down. And so what we're turning it into here is about 30. We got this big rubber face from a theater group, and we're going to make a person with a full set of clothes on and have them bound up there, and they'll go up and down and shake themselves side to side. Of course, it's like an execution style thing. So of course, this guy will get executed. Large amounts of blood will come out of it and things like that. Over here we've got the party jail, which is there's a little flat spot here. So this is going to be like we've got these figures that are just got made actually of like people having anal sex, like silhouette pictures of people having anal sex, and it'll be backlit from behind. And we got a big sign from a party supply company. That's a big red sign that says "party" on it, so that's flashing off and on. And everybody knows that prisons are just a blast, right? We need to make them harsher. So you'll see the silhouette of these guys having sex in the window here. And on the front would be another thing. I think we'll have like a blowjob thing in the front. Here's a sex thing. And very tastefully done. And this jail will be mounted on a cannon, essentially, on sliders. So it'll be launched off the hill. If anybody's familiar with some of the things we've done before, we've done a lot of stuff with pretty big structures where we've like blown them up and knocked them down. I think that the biggest thing we did is in Barcelona. We had like basically a 2-story building that was on rails that just dove off of this fountain and crashed to pieces on the ground in front of right in front of the audience. And in this case, we're going to launch it off the hill. two guys that are controlled by this. They're controlled by a very sophisticated computer card, the kind that they use typically for laboratory experiments. They're called, it's a National Instruments card that can control many channels simultaneously with overlapping control kind of inputs. The pink area is but anyway, basically it's two guys whose heads are connected to these cylinders, and they come back and forth to each other, and they fight each other. They just beat the shit out of each other. They'll be like, all the guys are going to have blue jeans on, and or prison blues, and they'll be having basically a fight for the whole time of the show and spurting blood all over. We're going to have Unabomber guys all up in the hills here, which will be little guys like with stick figures with clothes on and stuff, holding packages in front with the Unabomber face. And these will also be launched with like basically cannons, and they'll have cable retainers on them so that when they get about 50 feet in the air, the package will detonate. And bear in mind, this is right next to the post office, so there's going to be some very upset people about it. I mean, the show's being promoted on the internet as like the lighter side of violent crime. So if there is a light side, we're going to find it. We're going to have a big steel barrier in front of the audience here, and there's a lot of other things. We're doing. There's a bunch of other stuff. But these are some of the centerpieces for the show. We're working on this thing called the Hand of God, which is sort of like the idea of like, punishment kind of a thing. It's a big spring-loaded hand probably about 7 feet long that is like those kind of puppets where you let the spring go and they spring up, and when you push them down, they collapse. Well, this is a hand that weighs about a ton that when it's got like 2 tons of truck springs on it that are cocked by a hydraulic cylinder. So it's like this normally. It's driven around. We have a military bomb loader. It'll be mounted on the front of a military bomb loader that's the current military bomb loaders. These are from '88. They're real nice ones. But that'll be remote controlled, and the hand will go up. It'll be like the Hand of God, because, it'll collapse like this, and when it gets to the end of its travel, it goes like that. So if you're a god, you wouldn't grab somebody and wring their necks. That's for like people to do and stuff. This is just like, of course, if you're God, you would just go like that, right? You'd have the power. And so that's the Hand of God's going to be in there on this bomb loader. Let's see. There's Chip Flynn is making this really amazing triangle machine that's got this devil head on it. It's a big triangular shaped machine with this head that flies in and out. Very nice. And with these fingers that can go up and grab people and stuff. Be able to grab people in the audience and give them like the grip of death kind of thing. I don't know. There's a bunch of other stuff. Lots of cool image stuff. But anyway, that's how we would. It's kind of how we. These are the drawings we would use. This thing doesn't seem to focus, but if it's in focus, these are the kind of drawings we use to set up the shows. We'll have like numerous meetings. Every week we have a meeting where we discuss the progress of events. There's a lot of bureaucracy and bullshit. I mean, not just in trying to build complicated machines, which is obviously a really pain in the ass anyway, but the actual human factor to trying to organize everybody and trying to keep like a coherent look and feel to the whole event, but still let people, do their own thing. It takes there's a lot of jabbering that's got to go on, a lot of meetings, and you got to kind of, a lot of decisions that have to be made about how things are going to work. To get an event like this to happen. In an event like this, we often do really, really, really huge structures for the shows too. We've had to cut that back a little bit because just a logistical thing. A lot of the shows where we did these events where we had huge structures were in Europe, and they'd be throwing money at you like there was no tomorrow, and giving you like time on site of like 2 weeks, and you could build a city in 2 weeks the way we build them. And so we built a lot of stuff in Europe. We kind of had a trademark where we built some really huge structures, temporary structures, which I always find lots of fun. This here is going to be all this stuff's going to be prefab because we really only have 2 days on the site, and legally only 1 day. But they've kind of talked the people who own it into saying, oh yeah, well some of the artists want to bring stuff in the day before and just kind of leave it on the site, and people said, oh, that's fine, right? Little do they know that they'll probably about 100 or 150 people will descend on this place. with multiple flatbed trucks and just tons and tons of equipment for 2 days. But I mean, no one could believe that if you told somebody, oh, we don't pay anybody, we're going to have 150 people here working for a couple days, and they're going to bring this many tons of like heavy equipment. I mean, in San Francisco, nobody even knows what heavy equipment is. There's not one factory in the city of San Francisco, so nobody even believes that you could have equipment. No one even. People are starting to forget what it is. It's like, yeah, right. I've seen computer monitors before, but a machine, My grandpa used to work with machines, I remember, kind of a thing. But anyway, I mean, some of the structured things, I like doing the big structures, but we've had to sort of change things a little bit. I mean, there's a couple of them here that Pat shows. This was this was like a 60-foot tall spiral windmill that we made when we were in Amsterdam. You can see there's a big spiral. That's about almost 60 feet tall, and it's actually a functioning windmill. Over here is a big prop made of some store that lost its little insignias. They got made into this 30-foot high device. There's about 35-foot high device in Seattle in '90. Went back and forth on a track. And then over here, there's a big barrel props from the show. We did in '87. Here's another shot of the windmill spinning, in fact. And I don't know why I went Barcelona. I think I was thinking about this. The biggest ones we did, I think, were in Barcelona. And this is one of the buildings we built. It's sort of like a little mall that we built, kind of burned down. But you can see from the scale of that device, that's about 20 feet, that length of that thing. These were two-story facades. And there was another one built like over here on this fountain in the Plaza de Cascades in Barcelona. So, we've always, we're having to change a little bit about the way we work with things just because we're having to be a little bit sneakier, and I kind of regret that some, but you got to kind of change with the times, and maybe someday we'll be legitimate in spite of ourselves. I don't know. The other project that we're mainly working on now, I don't know if any of you waste your time surfing the internet, but for 2 years we've had an FTP site and maintained several websites on the World Wide Web. And, many thousands of people visit our little sites. There's like QuickTime movies, lots 100, 150 different images on there, text files of all, interviews, things like that, articles about SRL. But what we're doing now, we just put an ISDN line into our place, which is a very high speed, higher speed digital line, not that high speed, but high enough to do live video. And we're working with another company that does VRML, virtual reality modeling language stuff, and they're building a control interface so that people will be able to log on, and we're setting up a couple machines so that you can run them remotely. And we'll basically be the first people on the internet allowing you to run complete strangers, to run lethal machinery over the internet and get feedback of what you're doing. I don't know if any of you are familiar, there's maybe 5 or 6 projects now. I think that one of the best known ones is by this guy, Dr. Ken Goldberg, who's one of the people, he's at Berkeley. He's one of the people he was down here for a while at Santa Barbara though, but he's one of the people who's been doing a lot of stuff he did the Telegarden and various machines that can be operated over the net over the past couple years. And but just recently the technology has advanced to the point where there's enough people out there that know how to set it up that it can really be done. So we've been working and doing tests and stuff like that the last few weeks, and we had to kind of stop that because of the show. But we're going to be doing a live broadcast of this show over the internet where people will be able to log in and get a live mix from the various camera positions. You'll be able to access that through Berkeley, and there will be an announcement. The easiest way to find out about it is, rather than me giving you, I could give you the address. I could do that, but you probably I can't write it down in the dark anyway. But if you just go into any of the internet browsers and just type in SRL, it'll bring you right to, there's 5 or 6 choices, and the first one is the Berkeley site maintained by Eric Paulos. And we'll be broadcasting through there. So even if you're down here, I mean, an arbitrary number of people will be able to observe the performance as it happens anywhere in the world. And we're going to try to incorporate more of this kind of stuff in the show rather than sort of, I mean, I think there's a lot of disappointment and fear, really, about the whole encroachment of the virtual world on the worlds of people who try to do real things. I'm sure as architecture students, you must be getting the idea that a lot of you probably are going to basically be getting jobs building architectural models or worlds on the internet, probably. I mean, that's really, realistically, that's probably where most people are going to go. I mean, most people I know that are architects, that's what they do now. They get hired by, companies because at least they know how to do 3D modeling on, or they can learn how to do it because they know something about third dimensional design. And so, I mean, in some ways, it's always a second-rate solution, I think. But rather than just get bummed out about it, I mean, I see it happening all the time. It affects me. It affects lots of other artists who are trying to do stuff, and they sort of, especially in Europe, a lot of the money in Europe is going to things based on computers, not real things anymore. It's going to things that are computer-based and internet-based. They really caught the fever there. Of course, there's actually an art scene there, so. There's actually artists that work with technology instead of trying to buttress painting and sculpture and stuff like that. And so that's just where it's definitely made it harder for us to do things, because how can you undercut with you're bringing 50 tons of equipment over there and 30 people? How are you going to undercut 4 or 5 people and a couple SGIs? It's pretty tough, really. It's just a lot more easy to imagine dealing with people who can set up something and they don't even need to come there. You're sort of competing with people who can operate from a remote location and stage and do their thing. So rather than just sit around and cry about it, part of the idea is to incorporate more of this kind of stuff and take advantage of it, really, take advantage of the technology, which is what we always try to do. But in this case, it has been such a good thing for us, and the possibilities are really good that we're going to try to incorporate much more of that kind of thing in anything we do, partly just because of the glamour factor. I mean, it is sort of cool, but it is sort of cool in a way, It's sort of like, I mean, I don't really think that it provides much public access, because what part of the public really has access to any level of the internet, much less like ISDN lines and stuff like that. But certainly any university is going to be able to connect to things that you're doing and see it at a very good, watch what you're doing at a very reasonable clip and actually interact with stuff. Eventually more people will have that kind of access. And we're just trying to get it on the ground floor so we can control as much territory as possible. Always the goal at SRL. If it doesn't involve compromise, we'll basically try to do it. I got a couple other tapes. Maybe, I don't know if anyone's got any questions or anything like that. I could maybe go over a couple questions, and I can show you another. And there's a tape from the Austria show that's, I think, pretty interesting. But just see if there's anybody has a direction of any of this stuff they'd like to follow up on. It's very hard to see you, but I probably can. If you squeak.
Tesla coils actually power anything, or that's mainly used as a display?
No, it's used to remove power from the power grid, strictly. It's strictly a waste of energy. Just for kicks only. No, I don't know. There's talk of that. I mean, certainly it could power. We've created very powerful engines for erasing credit cards, which involved capacitor banks from laser power supplies, big laser power supplies, and just inductive coils. Drop a few mega amps in there for a millisecond or so, and you generate a few Teslas. Knock out everybody's credit card in the audience. We did that in installation one time, and many people lost data, and people with pacemakers weren't allowed to come in to that performance, actually. Oh, it's videotape, yeah. You could, but when the pulse comes off, when the pulse comes on, it won't erase tapes, but the image just goes whoop. But no, I mean the Tesla coils, it's nothing real practical about it. No, I think that still happens. It's a little hard to say, but there is sometimes, but it really varies from show to show, I tell you. I mean, I'll show you another show, and you can see that it's got that old random feeling, believe me. But no, no. In this show, that was part of the actual production. The idea being that this was a vision of the apocalypse that was more along the lines of Oscar Wilde. You know, like the world is going to go out with a whimper, not a bang. But of course, everybody wants a bang, right? So the idea was, yeah, that's why at the end the big arm just sort of collapsed gently into a pile, and you know, we instead of having just chaos. You know, we had like a lot of weird interactions between machines where they were kind of facing off and doing their little machine world trips with each other. We had just a lot more of that kind of stuff. I mean, partly because we could, but also partly because it was a show about the apocalypse. I wanted to just to deal with the expectations of that, and just instead of having just like fire and explosions and stuff, have fire and explosions, but also have a very kind of balletic sort of interaction between stuff. You know, but that it really changes from show to show. Yeah, but I mean, you always focus on a different angle of doom and gloom and boom. You know, I mean, it's you know, it's like SRL is always. I mean, what better way to express really extreme things than to use extreme mechanisms? I mean, really, you know, they sort of speak for themselves in that way, and if you just sort of tilt them and nudge them into, you know, into place, they make a pretty strong statement. I mean, I don't, you know, it's hard to know like really what the effect of these kind of things have. I mean, my ultimate fantasy is that people on their dying bed, you know, will just somehow recall, you know, these images will just be indelible. They may not mean anything in particular, or they may mean only really, you know, very subjective things to people. I mean, I hear that about these things. I don't know. But, you know, the idea is that maybe when you're at the peak of your fever, you know, you'll be thinking about what you saw at an SRL show, maybe right before you're going to die. I mean, to me, that's like the ultimate thing to have created, is something that people remember at the most inappropriate times. And I think, pardon me? Does it mean anything to me personally? I don't know. I don't know. I mean, we're always trying to, you know, we're always on the scam. Got to offer me a deal? I'm the dealinist. I'd love to come down to LA again, by the way. If any of you sneaky people here want to sneak us down here again, we came down here in '85. I thought we did a wonderful show with Lace. And quite frankly, I don't understand why we never got invited down here again. I thought we treated everyone very well down here. And I don't understand what the problem is. And I think that it's about time someone brought us down here again. We're like, you know, we clean up after ourselves, you know, we only make noise once. They're the perfect pet, really. SRL's the perfect pet. Very well mannered. You meet a lot of interesting people. They're all very tired, so they're fairly harmless, you know. Pardon me? Yeah, that's been remarked on earlier today. But anyway, we do have a fairly, for some reason, I don't understand why, we've never really been able to get shows in the winter, but probably because I've just whined so much lately. I mean, really, you know, I really haven't let up for a minute, you know. I spent 4 months this year scamming shows and like doing the scam and like talking people into it and going to like fucking Europe and Australia, trying to convince people to like do the thing, man. But you know, eventually, you know, everyone knew that, you know, I think that a lot of other people heard that I was like really on the make to try to get some deals set up, and so finally we got these deals set up for the now and for the winter. We're doing 2 more shows this winter, one smaller show in San Francisco and produced by Wired Magazine on January 9th, and then another show in Phoenix involved with Crash, which is like a thing that David Therian runs in Phoenix, Arizona. And that'll be kind of in connection with, I guess, a Super Bowl down there or something. It'll be sort of the anti-Super Bowl or something like that. And they'll all, you know, they're all going to be smaller to medium-sized shows, but you know, I don't know what really is, I don't really know what's in store for us after that. We're going to be doing the internet thing, though, before the end of the year. We'll be running at least one machine, which would be the Air Launcher, which is the device that you saw Tim Wadlington wearing at the beginning of that show. It's a teleoperated machine. It fires explosives. It's basically a military weapon, a teleoperated military weapon. It has a 25-round magazine. It fires, in the shows, it fires concrete cans with detonators in them, Coke cans filled with concrete with detonators in them and high explosives, so when it hits stuff, it blows up. And I don't know, go through about 3 inches of plywood. I'm not exaggerating, 3 inches of plywood. It's happened before. And it'll go through a cinder block wall, like out the, and blow one block out usually each time. And, you know, it's an art sculpture, so, and it's powered by a high-pressure gas launcher, which was a NASA design, another little sideline of how we kind of co-opt technology. This was a avalanche control device developed by NASA to you know, so that people in the park services wouldn't have these really have howitzers, basically, so they have a very complicated launcher firing essentially inert projectiles that you couldn't just take a pipe and put one in there and hit it with a hammer and have it go off or something if you stole the shell like you can with a howitzer shell. And so that was the idea, and I took that design and made it work a lot better than I'm sure they ever did, and it made it very reliable, and built this air launcher out of it. And so anyway, that's what we'll have is we'll have a targeting ring that'll be spinning around the machine about 25 feet in diameter with various targets on it, many of which will represent things that over the image quality that you'd be able to see on the internet would be difficult to discern from, for instance, real things. And you'll have a choice whether to destroy these things or not. And of course we'll be having, there'll be a timeout, so you have to make a decision. And we'll be doing various. Has anybody ever heard of Stanley Milgram, who he wrote a book called Obedience to Authority, which is this book about an experiment he did. Basically, the idea being that you put people in situations and you have technicians in a laboratory environment, and you see how far they'll go towards actually torturing a subject, in this case an actor, behind a glass window at the behest of the researchers, and how they'll respond to the pressure to, like, and he got into a lot of trouble for this. He died of a heart attack about, I think in 1980 something, or he died then. I think it was a heart attack. But anyway, we're sort of going to be, I don't want to give it away, but we're going to sort of be doing various levels of this event where we'll try to recreate some of that experiment and create a kind of a hoax that will begin in a very arcane segment of the behavioral science community on the internet and sort of branch out from there into like more of a party, public kind of event that anybody can get part of. But anyway, we've got our little schemes for that. But that's the other main project we're doing is the internet thing. Anyway, that's kind of like, that's it really for us now. I mean, that's kind of our shtick these days. Is there another question? And we're going to show a tape from our Austria show. Well, how do you play against the house in Vegas, you know? How come the house always seems to win? You know, it's like, you know what I mean? You can sort of stack the deck in to an arbitrary level, really, if you know what you're doing, and unless you really know the whole picture, which is virtually impossible, you can't know. I mean, why do people think that these shows are really dangerous when we haven't hurt anybody yet? You know, maybe it's unusual that people haven't noticed that. The way that the machines are structured so that they appear to be extremely dangerous, but in fact they don't actually do dangerous things to people. I mean, there's like a whole element of like being the magicians behind the, behind the curtain really, that the Wizard of Oz kind of a thing, where you really have sort of an advantage against either a viewer or, in the case of this internet thing, an operator. And I'm not going to tell you. I mean, it would be obvious how you could do that. It should be obvious. I mean, there's all sorts of ways that you can create an interface, and if it's designed properly, and that's the key word, if it's designed properly, you can interrupt the device anywhere along the chain of command and deactivate things. Not even with a delayed command set you could do that. Not even, not like they have a delayed voice on the radio or something so they can cut out obscenities. You don't even need to do that, really. It's even easier over the internet. I mean, when you're doing it in real time, you have to have some level of believable threat to really, a credible threat to really be able to convince people that there's something extreme going on, that it's not just like, like a tractor, like making a ditch or something, right? Where they'll stand right next to it, right? And so it's even more difficult in a case like that, where you've got really just video streams you're dealing with. It's pretty easy, I think. Yes? I forgot, I just realized I'm supposed to be repeating these questions, so for the benefit of the people recording this. So basically the gentleman has asked here, how is it that with the time spent making these devices, which is a lot of time, how is it that it's ended up where these devices are destroyed after the show? Well, in fact, I'll tell you right now that they're not destroyed. I mean, the big arm is designed so that you could tip it over and it won't harm itself, It's very easy to repair these machines. We repair them all the time. I mean, from that show, even though it looks like some of the machines took a little bit of a beating, it was only like a couple days of repair time to fix all of them. They're just pretty easy to fix. I mean, if you've got like a really, really complete machine shop and very highly skilled people, you can repair stuff really quickly. Have you ever noticed that after an earthquake, stuff gets fixed kind of fast sometimes? Like, think of how fast they fix the freeways here. San Francisco, they're still trying to fix like one freeway. They haven't fixed one freeway yet. But here, where people like are serious about their freeways, they just fixed them. It's a lot. It's just not that hard to fix stuff. It's a lot harder to do it the first time. But once you've already done it, you're just fixing something. It just isn't that difficult. And also just from a philosophical standpoint, I just like to say that. For me, part of like doing this kind of stuff is to really, it's sort of a ritual really, where you don't want to really acknowledge the preciousness of these devices or any object really. You really want to like prove to them and prove to yourself that they don't matter, that you don't really care. That it's sort of like if you had $1 million and you just said, well, it's great to have $1 million. I think I'll just like throw it down, throw it in the air at a party. You know what I mean? And and people think it's great for a while, and then they forget about you, and then if you get another $1 million, you can do it again, right? They'll think about you again. I mean, it's sort of like that kind of a thing. It's, I think that it's, it's sort of a sacrificial gesture that I believe that's important for people to be willing to make, and I'm willing to make it because I think that part of the problem of having powerful devices and having power, having devices that will make powerful statements, whether it be military equipment, or political prowess or something. Part of the problem with people who have that kind of power is they're afraid of, they have a sort of a respect for it, so that they can't actually do anything with it. They can't do anything, good with it or interesting with it. They're sort of, bound by it, and they sort of just stick to the rule book, really. They sort of let their weapons be used to like kill a bunch of people instead of just having fun with them. It's like having parties with them or something like that. Or maybe not even building them in the first place. You know what I mean? The idea that technology is such a precious thing, I just like to, I think it's important to sort of disavow it, the idea that the work we do is so precious that it's got to be used practically. I don't believe that. I think that in the same way that I think culture and the arts used to be this idea that, you know, we would take our extravagance and express it through culture and the arts. I think that extravagance now is very well expressed by the extravagant use of technology just for its own sake, just even for, in our case, for the effect you can create with it, and is sort of the you know, the situation where you can just kind of destroy your work, really. I don't know. I mean, I believe in that enough to do it anyway, and so do the other people who work with me. They're sort of, you know, we're all sort of gathered around the funeral pyre of our activities, gleefully watching it burn up. Okay, I'm going to show the Austria tape. I'll give you a little bit of background on this show. This is a show we did in '92. I'm going to have to actually fast forward to the show part. But this is a show we did in '92. It was called The Deliberate Evolution of a War Zone. And it had a rather interesting, it's probably, I think this show is one of the reasons why we haven't been back to Europe again, is that we kept talking and all the pre-press stuff, you know, in the interviews and stuff, I kept stressing about how this was a show that was meant to remind the Austrian people that there was a war in, you know, 50 miles away from them in Bosnia and all that stuff, because, you know, I got there and it was the thing that nobody would want to talk about, that there was like a war, that Serb planes had been overflying Austria and stuff like that, and people were a little bit panicked about it, but, you know, as being the good Germans they are, they just didn't really want to talk about it. And so I thought, well, what better theme to really have as the show, as, you know, this kind of have it just say it's about a war, right, about a war zone. And so that was what all the hype in the pre-press publicity dictated and all that kind of stuff. And then when we actually did the show, we had things in there that were so loud, and all the loud things were tailored to sound like military activity, like even more directly than this one, that we had like some machines that were tuned to really sound like that. And it was in this little town. A lot of people hadn't heard of what was going on. So what happened is the night of the show, about 400 or 500 people called into the police and said, hey, it sounds like there's a war going on. Is there something happening? Are the Serbs coming to Graz and stuff? And you know, the police said, oh no, it's an art thing. About 40 people apparently didn't buy that story. They called the Ministry of Defense in Vienna. And a few of them got through to the Minister of Defense, and they said, look, you know, they were panicking, they were hysterical, saying, we're being bombed, we're being bombed. And so all the forces in Austria got put on a red alert, like a security alert. And then he ordered, like, right towards the end of the show, about 20 dudes in military fatigues with all this test equipment came down there. And what had happened is he had talked to the police, and the police said, no, it's just an art thing. And he goes, well, whatever it is, I'm sending a bunch of men out there, and we're going to be we're documenting this. We're trying to, whatever it is, it has to be documented. But just in case it's like some trick, we're going to put the forces on alert. And the cops went, okay. So then they did it, and then, you know, everyone was really freaked out after the show. The presenters were really freaked out. We didn't really know why. And then the next day, we just were going crazy and doing the usual thing of running the machines, and it was a holiday, right? And we kept sort of joking that it was Hitler's birthday, you know, just being kind of assholes, just being drunk and kind of funny, running the V1 and stuff. And all these cops showed up, and they just like kind of surrounded us. They were just going, ha ha. And the cops came up to me and with other people, and they go, so what's going on, you know? And I said, oh, you know, we're just fooling around. You know, and they go, well, it's a holiday, you know, you're not supposed to be doing this, and there's all this trouble from that other show. And I said, oh, so it's someone, and then someone said, oh yeah, it's Hitler's birthday, right? You don't want it to do this because it's Hitler's birthday. And then they just got really mad, and they just said they were going to arrest, the presenters just said, they're going to arrest you if you don't say you're going to stop doing this. And we went, okay. So we said, we won't do it anymore, and then they left. But I guess it got pretty intense. And then the next day, there were these big articles in the paper about how this whole defense alert had happened, and about how these Americans had come here and created this panic in the city and all this shit. And, you know, it was a grim, the presenters had somewhat of a grim experience with the whole thing, I think. But anyway, that's, you know, it's funny how just little games really can sometimes result in these. I mean, we've done many, many hoaxes and tricks and, you know, things like that over the years that have resulted in these hysterical reactions. We did a bomb hoax in San Francisco back in '89, and did like a big counterfeit money thing in New York City in '88 where we had money bombs. It's more than 7 years ago, so I don't care anymore. Really good counterfeits, and $3 million of it in these leaflet bombs blowing up over the audience, and people were spending it. It was really good counterfeits, and it was the best offset counterfeits you could possibly do with like 2-color, nice paper, and get it a little dirty, and it would pass. And we just do stuff like that just because. I don't know, we never have really gotten in trouble for it yet. Never got in trouble for it yet, never got caught. But anyway, that's what happened with this show, with the Austria show. I think, at least up to now, it's been our swan song. We've been trying to get back to Europe, and maybe we will get back again, but in some ways, whatever we've done there has been marked by trouble, Like in this Austria show, too, some guy tried to kill himself. He was like helping us. He was an engineer, and he was crazy. And he made a bomb to show off or something. And he was so tweaked out that he lit it and stood there just above it. And we thought that it was an accident. And then finally his friend said, oh, well, he tried to kill himself. He lit it and he just stood there and didn't move. And he almost killed himself. He was blinded in one eye, almost blinded in the other eye. So the story that got out was just sort of like, it was highly suppressed. Just by brute force of the organizer. But, things like that, it's bad for business. Very bad for business. Anyway, I'm going to play that tape. You can see this innocent little show where we were just trying to have a little fun in Austria. And it sort of got blown out of proportion. And, another thing I'll tell you about this show, that I guarantee there's going to be some interesting things, because we're making literally thousands of machine gun replicas in plaster, perfect replicas of real machine guns. And we're going to be, with your ticket, you get a machine gun, painted black. So imagine like 3,000 people all standing next to the post office going, hey, 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 with like realistic submachine guns in their hands. And 45s also. We have some nice 45s also. So just, that's the kind of stuff that we would just, as an aside, just as sort of a joke or something like that, to do that kind of a thing. But it's not LA, it's San Francisco. The cops there just sort of, they won't shoot first and ask questions later. They haven't got to that point yet. And now that, fortunately, Willie Brown is going to be mayor, the arts are going to thrive. I tell you, man. It's going to be good for business. Very good for business. The cops won't ever be able to be evil. If you ever get sick of the cops and stuff, you'll be able to just move up there. We have a cool mayor. It's only a slight asshole. And so I think that nobody will get shot. It'll just be all fun and games. Maybe everyone will get their plaster guns confiscated. But right now they're cranking them out as we talk. This is about 10 minutes long, this section. We didn't have time to cue it up beforehand, I'm sorry to say. This show's a little more chaotic, so. The announcement in the beginning is very good, so I want to get to that. I want to get to the safety announcement. Machine builder at San Francisco. Trying to get to there. These decks are. Pardon me? Ooh, look at that. Ooh, 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 that hurt. Ouch.
To safety regulations. The designated
I want to get to the, okay. Whoop.
An SRL show is not dangerous if the audience remains in its designated area and responds to safety regulations. The designated areas for audience are inside fences and well lit. You leave these areas at your own risk. Touching any of the machines is strictly forbidden. In order to avoid danger for yourself and others, you are urged to follow the instructions of the ushers, the security guards, and SRL workers. Follow their orders instantly. The organizer, Strohscher Herbst, takes no responsibility for physical or other damage to anyone not following security rules. Thank you and enjoy the show.
That was also edited and shot by Leslie Gladchow. This is going to be part of some tapes that are going to be released, hopefully by the end of the year. We're going to be releasing tapes from these 2 tapes, a show, the Barcelona show we did in France in '92 in Aurillac, and also like a bunch of stuff edited from the BBC shoot, because we have the rights to that stuff too. So there'll be a heap of new tapes to buy or get, copy, probably more likely from your friends. But I don't know. I always feel sort of like Raymond Roussel. Anybody ever read like Locus Solus or Impressions of Africa? That books written by Raymond Roussel around the turn of the century. Well, they're all about SRL. I mean, literally, they're all about like people. There are all these weird situations where people are just machines, or these people are making these bizarre mechanisms, which of course would have been completely impossible at the time. They're precursors to the Surrealist movement, basically, the literature. And Raymond Roussel also wrote a book, he was a very wealthy, sort of eccentric guy who was educated, which is about the only way you could get educated back then, is to be rich. But anyway, he wrote a book, How I Came to Write These Books, in which he explains the mechanism by which he structured these narratives. And he really did structure them in this very extreme way. They're very intentional in a way. And it's sort of, I always feel like I'm describing something really, I always feel a little bit bogus about trying to talk about it. But in this show, it's a little hard to see from the video too, but in this show, the idea that it was a war zone, okay, so it started out by there was about a 10 or 15 minute section in the beginning which wasn't shown that much in the video because it wasn't that exciting, where the machines were just coming up and caressing each other, and there was lots of Lebensstrom and everything, and and then finally the V1 comes out there and starts like creating all this noise, and then the machines sort of panic and they start fighting with each other, and then the UN, which is the guy in the hook, goes in there and sort of keeps breaking up the fights, and they keep starting again, and finally everything is just destroyed, and the beautiful world is no more. And that's sort of the idea about how it's a very crude way to tell a story, but that's, for this show, that was sort of how the story was intended to be told. I think that I'll try to answer some questions now. I'll show, if anybody wants to hang around, I'll show a little bit of stuff from the BBC shoot, which had some really funny stuff in it. That was the only thing we got going last year. We actually did that in end of May instead of these other events, where we just staged a bunch of machine interactions down in the SRL yard, cleared it out and did that, and that was the basis of this documentary, along with a bunch of stock footage from shows and stuff. Does anybody have any other queries? Yes, the person with their hand? You, right there. Yes? Well, yeah, I do have I have some personal reasons for using the car, because I really don't eat meat myself. I'm pretty much a vegetarian, so it really, meat sort of grosses me out a lot, and I figure what's bad for me has got to be bad for other people. And I don't know, we use those things in kind of an emblematic way. I guess it's sort of like, if you only had machines and just robots and stuff, it sort of is a little bit more like a Willy Wonka thing, But if you have some meat attached to a machine, or you're doing something horrible with it, it's hard to really picture it as being part of a Walt Disney movie. You know what I mean? And, in that sense, I think it has value in that way. It's sort of like, why would we do that? You know what I mean? Like, why spoil a perfectly good-looking machine by putting a bunch of meat on it? I don't know. But it certainly keeps it from being at least for me, it's less pleasant to look at, and I value unpleasantness and kind of try to generate it. I don't know I don't think anything is really very shocking anymore. If you're going to really shock somebody, you sort of have to stab them or something, right? You know what I mean? Or shoot them or something. I think that's still pretty shocking, but I don't think very much else is anymore. And I'm like I said, I'm only mildly disenfranchised. Disenfranchisement light. So anyway, Is there another? What? Well, I don't hear any other questions. I could make up some questions. I have to repeat the questions anyway, so I could just like pretend, right? Let's see, what should I say? What do we want to know? Does anybody want to know what kind of people come down there and work? Well, there's a very interesting mix. We have like, I'll tell you a little bit about it. We have, there's like real nerdy scientist types down there. There's a lot of women that work at SRL that build machines and design machines and stuff like that. There's only a few people that have actually built and designed whole machines, and so far there's been no women that actually have built whole really complicated machines that they've designed, but they've run many of the projects and they run machines in the show. So we attract a breed of very tough, very capable women down there, which is nice because, you know, it's a comfy place to work. There's lots of big tools. There's not like a bunch of like guys like yelling at you like that you can't do it and stuff like that. So we get a really, I consider a very high caliber women down there, which is really good, you know, a very important thing for me as part of an organization to have that kind of thing, because I don't believe, you know, even though people try to say it's all guy thing, you know, an awful lot of women I know are really into really extreme things. There's a lot of, anybody ever read Knuckle Girls by Richard Allen? You know about the Ina Murray syndrome then. Come on, hasn't anybody read any like trashy white trash books about England? Like what about Pinky and Brighton Rock? There's a lot of unsavory characters in the UK that people write about. Ina Murray is one of them. But anyway, there's a couple books about Ina Murray that Richard Allen wrote. She's really a nasty girl who's really into the bad violence and stuff like that. But anyway, we have like, you know, there's like a lot of tech people, a lot of people who do computer stuff, a lot of people from the theater world. We really don't have that many visual arts people there. It's pretty much, there's people who like have a background, industrial design background. There's a lot of people like that. But mostly it's like engineers, scientists, just kind of weirdos, people that know how to do like some basic fabrication things, and all the way from like, you know, really genius people, designers and technicians and scientists, to just people that don't have that many skills. There's pretty much a full range of people, which is one of the cool things, the fun things about SRL, is there's a really weird mix of people down there. You'd normally never get together in the same place. And if any of you have been to San Francisco, you're aware that there's a lot of that kind of intermingling going on, where the high-tech people and the art-type people really mix together at parties and, you know, hipster kind of scenarios and stuff like that. So it's, you know, it's sort of, that's part of why the organization is like it is. But, you know, it's not like it's actively, I just try to make it, basically I try to make SRL a place where people who have fantasies about using their skills in different ways, then they can achieve their fantasy through the means we have at our disposal at SRL. And I basically, rather than being like the leader, I just try to facilitate those kind of fantasies so that people, I mean, some people want to design machines, you know, and some people want to build them down there, which is fine. I try to help them do that. There's some people who want to build machines, but they don't want to do them there because they want to maintain independence. I help them set up their shops so they can do that. There's people who just want to make parts because they just want to do something different with their skills, but they don't want to get into anything committal like designing a whole device. So they just come down there and they make parts for stuff. It doesn't really cost anything. I fund it by working, basically, by doing lectures like this, man. You know, penny a minute, a penny a word. That's how it gets funded. If it's funded by my working, doing jobs, or you know, I also do a lot of, I do consultation work. I buy and sell computer equipment. I'm involved with sort of like, you know, computer, you know, people who deal with computer equipment. I don't know, stuff like that. A lot of gifts that we get, I turn around and sell, you know, or trade for other things. We have a lot of arrangements with people who deal with surplus equipment, high-tech surplus. I mean, you know, I can get arbitrary amounts of stuff, very high-quality stuff, And I have enough outlets where it's almost as good as buying it. I mean, really, you can get stuff you could never buy. I mean, someone just sold me a cruise missile engine for $150. They just someone at the Air Force, Navy, happened to make a mistake, put a cruise missile engine in a shipment of stuff. It had 80 hours on it. It's like brand new. It's, 400-pound thrust motor, high bypass turbofan. I got it for $150 and it works. So, we are, yeah. There's a guy, Dazier, who's making a flying wing type radio control thing, and we're trying to make some. We're going to use the cruise missile engine to make a levitating platform, in fact. But that's probably not. Maybe late. Maybe next year we'll be doing that. But it doesn't really cost very much. It's really. I keep the overheads really low, and I'm funding this show just off my credit card. And out of the gate of the show, I'll get paid back, hopefully. So it's, there is no funding. Nobody gives me any money. I basically have to get it by hook or by crook, and, I'm ruthless enough or effective enough to be able to do it. And I have a lot of really, really good people working with me who have a similar bent. And I don't know. It happens somehow. And we're the Republicans' worst nightmare. They thought they were going to kill the arts, right, by cutting all the funding off, and it just made us meaner, And I think that's the way you have to look at that. The society just wants you to shrivel up and die. And, unfortunately, as we know from experience, when you want somebody to shrivel up and die, they just end up becoming a lot more, not nastier and more virulent, ultimately. And I think that's the kind of, if that's the kind of the kind of scene there is for creative people, I guess we sort of fit into that worldview. No, I usually don't. Just because a lot of the things we make are proprietary and they're very, very difficult to come up with, and I don't want a bunch of knockoffs out there like doing, if people are going to do stuff with machines, there's like 10 trillion, quadrillion possibilities, and they're going to have to pick one that they've figured out themselves. Unless you're part of the SRO Rotary Club, then of course you're privy to the, membership has its privileges. And, we're sort of like the Moose Lodge. We have like we have our meetings and secret handshakes and everything and slang and all that stuff. If you get into the SRO Rotary Club, anything's possible. Get access to those designs and lots of other good things. The gentleman behind the white shirt. Pardon me? Oh, the destruction of my hand? Oh, yeah, I was, just another, white guy who never had anything bad happen to him, and I thought I could do anything, get away with murder, anything I wanted to. And, I was making high explosives and doing all this kind of really crazy stuff and really dangerous things at shows. And that was back in '82, and I was, somebody had given me a manual that described how to make test rocket motors, but not model rocket motors, military, like booster motors for so I was making these motors that were probably 500 to 700 pound thrust motors that were similar to the motors that you'd have in an anti-tank missile, big motors and fiberglass shells with carbon fiber nozzles and all that crap. And you have to cure them in an oven, right under the explosion temperature for a couple days to get the binder to set properly. So, of course I was doing that, thinking, what the hell, I can do this, I can get away with it. And then, I was handling one really roughly, just like I would handle any of the things in my haste and, my hasty male way of doing it or whatever, aggressive way of doing it, and it fucking thing blew up and almost killed me, darn it. And, I think ultimately it's been a very good thing because it's helped enforce an idea of safety at SRL in a funny way, because all people have to do is just look at what happened to me, and nobody else has gotten hurt there but me, and everybody knows that, it hasn't happened to me again, And the rule, we really are we're very rigorous about all of our safety stuff. And it's a lot easier for me to speak with authority having been hurt really badly and almost killed, in fact. So I think that I think it's been very beneficial ultimately. But I had a couple toes put on my hand, that kind of thing. And I had that done in '83, beginning of '83, and it's worked, still works. So that's what happened. But basically, I think I kept doing SRL stuff, but I really changed the way that I did things and really mellowed out in a way before I killed anybody. And so far, since it's been '82, it's like 12 years, and we still have a good safety record. I didn't do it to the other hand yet. I think we have plenty of that now. It's a little harder to tell from the videos, but there's still it's still basically the same stuff. There's machines encroaching on the space of the audience, chasing people around. I mean, it happens more or less at different times, but there's also really extreme noise fields. I mean, there's there were a lot of stuff that was going on in some of these shows that you couldn't necessarily see going on there that were probably more irritating. I mean, we had a gas turbine firing right into the audience full of durian oil mixed in with the diesel, so it smelled like baby puke with the air heated to about 150 degrees, that 300 or 400 people were like breathing it and like being ready to beat up the guy running it. I mean, we still have our fun like that. I got to get out of here. And I know that you wish we'd leave too, but anyway, I'm like one of those machines. You turn them on and wind them up, and they don't turn themselves off always. So thank you very much. Be sure to talk to your local congressman about getting us down here. Get Maxine Waters to bring us down here. You can't until the day before. I'm very sorry. You can you can look on our internet site at srl.org, or you can call, I'm in the phone book, and there's a voicemail system that will give the information out. The best thing to do is try to find someone who lives up there who maybe has some connection with SRL, because we can really only accommodate a few thousand people, and we got 7,000 people by word of mouth last time, so I'm sorry, but I can't be more forthcoming than that. I wish I could.